On a quiet evening where the sun had just begun to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows through the dense canopy of the forest, Emily Carter and her faithful German shepherd, Max, set out on what was meant to be a peaceful walk. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and damp earth, a comforting balm after a long day. Emily's footsteps crunched softly on the leaf-strewn trail, and Max trotted close beside her, ears alert, nose twitching as he soaked in the myriad smells of the woods. Emily cherished these moments, the solitude and the calm. It was her sanctuary, a place where the chaos of the world slipped away, leaving only the rhythmic harmony of nature. Max, ever vigilant, mirrored her mood, his tail wagging gently as he darted from scent to scent, occasionally glancing back to ensure she was still close. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. But as the path wound deeper into the forest, the tranquility began to unravel. The distant hum of insects and the occasional bird call gave way to an unsettling silence. The kind of silence that presses on the skin and tightens the chest. Emily's instincts, honed through years of hiking alone and rescuing abandoned animals, whispered a warning she couldn't yet place. Without warning, a group of figures emerged from the shadows between the trees, moving quickly and with a ruthless purpose. The men were rough, faces obscured by low-hanging hoods and masks, their eyes cold and hard. They surrounded Emily and Max in an instant, cutting off any chance of retreat. The forest, once a haven, had become a cage. Emily's heart hammered as she tried to pull Max back, but the dog growled low, sensing the danger before she did. She reached for her phone, but one of the men swiped it away with a brutal shove. Another moved swiftly, grabbing Max's collar and yanking the dog back with a force that made him whimper. "Stay back," Emily warned, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. But the thugs were unmoved, their intentions clear in their hostile stance. There was no room for negotiation. Nearby, hidden behind a thick stand of firs, Marcus Kane watched the scene unfold. A former Navy SEAL recently returned from deployment, Marcus had settled into a quieter life as a wilderness guide, using his skills to navigate the rugged terrain he loved. But his past was never far behind, sharpening his senses and fueling his vigilance. He had been tracking suspicious activity in the area for days. Unusual patterns of movement, signs of illegal encampments, whispers of criminal dealings that didn't belong in these woods. When he heard the sharp, panicked barks of a dog and the frantic voice of a woman, something clicked. This was no ordinary dispute. Marcus's eyes narrowed as he took in the scene. The thugs were armed, their movements coordinated and practiced. They weren't just robbers or drifters. They were professionals, and Emily and Max were in serious danger. Without hesitation, Marcus slipped through the underbrush, every step measured and silent. His military training took over as he assessed the number of men, their positions, and the best way to intervene without putting the woman and her dog at greater risk. Emily tried to steady her breathing, her mind racing for a way out. Max strained against his captor's grip, his powerful body tense with the desire to break free. The forest that had once promised safety now felt suffocating, the shadows hiding threats that had never been there before. The leader of the thugs stepped forward, a grim smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You're in the wrong place, sweetheart," he sneered. "Tell us what you saw, and maybe we let you walk away." Emily's gaze flickered to Max, who met her eyes with unwavering loyalty. She shook her head slowly, refusing to betray whatever knowledge had brought these men here. Fear threatened to crack her resolve. But years of rescuing animals and working with vulnerable creatures had taught her the power of standing firm when it mattered most. Suddenly, a twig snapped behind the attackers, barely audible but enough to freeze them momentarily. Marcus's voice cut through the tense air, low and commanding. "Let her go." The thugs spun around, weapons raised, but Marcus was already moving. Years of combat experience honed his reflexes as he stepped from the shadows, every muscle coiled and ready. His presence was a warning and a challenge. "What the hell?" one of the men barked, leveling a pistol in Marcus's direction. But Marcus was faster, diving behind a tree as a shot rang out, the bullet embedding itself in the bark mere inches from his head. Emily's heart leapt, adrenaline surging as she scrambled to free herself and Max, but the ropes binding her wrists were tight. Max growled fiercely, his teeth bared, as Marcus assessed the situation, calculating his next move. The forest held its breath, the stillness thick with imminent violence. Marcus felt the familiar surge of focus that came with danger, the clarity that filtered out fear and doubt. He could save them, but only if he acted swiftly and decisively. As the thugs regrouped, their attention divided between Marcus and their captives. The tension escalated. Emily's desperation grew, but so did her hope, fueled by the sudden arrival of an unexpected protector. The night was far from over, and the forest was about to witness a confrontation that would change everything. Marcus Kane's breath was steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Years of military service had taught him how to remain calm in chaos. And now, as he crouched behind the twisted trunk of an ancient oak, he scanned the perimeter with sharp, calculating eyes. Every muscle in his body was poised for action, but his mind kept returning to the woman and her dog. How vulnerable they looked, tied up and surrounded by danger. Marcus was no stranger to the wilderness. Since returning from his last deployment overseas, he had traded the chaos of war zones for the quiet rigor of nature. He worked as a wilderness guide now, leading hiking trips and survival courses. But the skills that had kept him alive in combat remained razor sharp. The forest was both his refuge and his battlefield, a place where every sound and shadow told a story. Emily Carter was a nature enthusiast through and through. She had spent her life exploring the outdoors, captivated by the delicate balance of the wild. Her passion extended beyond mere appreciation. She was deeply involved in animal rescue, dedicating her free time to rehabilitating injured wildlife and finding homes for stray animals. Max, her loyal German shepherd, was more than a companion. He was a guardian, a partner in every adventure. Max was a striking dog, his large frame and muscular build belying an almost uncanny sensitivity. His deep brown eyes reflected a fierce loyalty and intelligence, and he had been by Emily's side since he was a puppy. Together, they had trekked countless trails, each journey solidifying a bond built on trust and mutual respect. As Marcus observed the scene, he couldn't help but notice the quiet strength emanating from Emily despite her dire predicament. She met his gaze briefly, a flicker of hope igniting in her eyes. Max growled low, the sound vibrating through his chest as if warning the men that their time was limited. Marcus's mind raced through potential strategies. The men holding Emily and Max were well organized and dangerous, clearly not amateurs. He recognized their movements, trained, tactical. They weren't just thugs. They were professionals, possibly linked to something larger than a simple robbery. Emily's voice had been firm earlier when she warned the men to stay back, a testament to her courage. But Marcus knew that courage could only carry someone so far when faced with overwhelming force. He understood the unspoken language between her and Max, the way the dog mirrored her emotions, how their silent communication was a lifeline in moments like these. He thought back to his own experiences, the countless nights spent navigating hostile territories, relying on instincts and training to survive. Yet, this was different. Here, in the heart of the forest, with a woman and her dog caught in the crosshairs of danger, the stakes felt intensely personal. Marcus's gaze shifted to Max, who was straining against his captor's grip. The dog's body was tense, every muscle coiled like a spring ready to unleash. Emily's hands trembled slightly, but she remained composed, her eyes locked onto Marcus's position. It was a silent plea for help, a beacon in the encroaching darkness. Suddenly, Marcus's thoughts were interrupted by the subtle rustle of leaves, a sound too deliberate to be natural. One of the men had moved to flank Marcus's position, weapons raised and scanning the shadows. Marcus pressed himself closer to the tree, suppressing the urge to engage prematurely. His years as a Navy SEAL had trained him to read situations with precision, to wait for the perfect moment to strike. He knew the risks of acting too soon. Any misstep could endanger Emily and Max further. Behind the scenes of this tense encounter, Marcus's own story was unfolding. A man caught between his past and present. The battles he had fought overseas lingered in his mind, ghosts that refused to fade. His decision to become a wilderness guide had been an attempt to find peace, to reconnect with something pure and untainted. But now, confronted with this crisis, he was reminded that danger could lurk anywhere. Emily, for her part, was no stranger to adversity. Her dedication to animal rescue had exposed her to the harsh realities of neglect and cruelty. She had learned resilience through hardship, a quiet strength that Marcus recognized instantly. Even bound and surrounded by threats, she radiated a determined spirit that refused to be broken. Max's presence was more than just physical. The dog was a living symbol of loyalty and protection. His keen senses had detected the danger long before Emily did, and his instincts were now guiding Marcus's approach. The forest around them felt charged, every sound amplified in the stillness. The fading light filtered through the leaves, casting fragmented patterns on the ground. Marcus's mind was a whirlwind of calculations, routes of escape, potential reinforcements for the attackers, timing. He couldn't afford to hesitate. Time was slipping away, with each passing second, and the longer Emily and Max remained captive, the greater the risk. Marcus shifted slightly, repositioning himself to get a clearer view of the captors. He noted their weapons, handguns, knives, and the way they communicated with terse, clipped gestures. It was a language Marcus had seen before in combat zones, a silent coordination that spoke of experience and danger. Emily's eyes flickered with a mix of fear and defiance. She mouthed something inaudible, a silent promise to Max that she wouldn't give up. Max responded with a low whine, his tail flicking in restless anticipation. Marcus's training kicked in fully now. He formulated a plan, a delicate balance between aggression and caution. He knew he couldn't just charge in. The risk to Emily and Max was too great. Instead, he would use the forest itself as an ally, moving through shadows, exploiting the terrain. Every detail mattered: the angle of the sun, the rustle of leaves underfoot, even the faint scent of smoke from a distant campfire. Marcus was attuned to his environment, a skill that had saved his life countless times. As he prepared to act, Marcus allowed himself a brief moment to acknowledge the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. This was no longer just about tracking criminals. It was about saving lives. Emily's trust in him, silent and profound, was a beacon in the darkness. Max's unwavering loyalty was a reminder of what was at stake. not just freedom, but the bond between a woman and her dog, tested in the crucible of danger. The setting sun dipped lower, casting the forest into deeper shadow. Marcus tightened his grip on the tactical knife strapped to his belt, ready to move. The time for waiting was over. The story was far from over. The night promised challenges, but within it, a glimmer of hope flickered. One man, one woman, one dog, standing against the encroaching darkness. Emily's mind raced as she struggled to piece together the fragments of what she had witnessed earlier that day. A routine hike had turned into a perilous trap, but the danger wasn't random, it was targeted. She had stumbled upon something dark, something these men wanted to keep buried. Earlier, while exploring a less traveled path near the edge of the forest, Emily had noticed a group of men unloading crates from an unmarked van into a concealed clearing. The crates were heavy, marked with symbols she didn't recognize, but the air around them was thick with the scent of stolen goods and secrecy. Her heart had hammered as she caught sight of weapons and equipment inside the crates. Items that didn't belong in the hands of these men or anywhere near the peaceful forest. She had instinctively taken photos with her phone, hoping to report the illegal activity to local authorities. But it was clear now that her presence had been detected. The thugs were part of a string of local robberies that had gone unsolved, their crimes masked by intimidation and fear. Emily realized she had become an unintended witness to their operation, and that made her a threat. As the men closed in on her now, tying her and Max to a gnarled tree, a wave of helplessness threatened to overwhelm her. The ropes bit into her wrists, and Max growled low, the sound filled with frustration and protectiveness. Emily whispered calming words to him, willing him to stay strong even as she felt the cold grip of fear tightening around her. The forest, which had always been a place of solace, now felt like a cage. The thick underbrush and towering trees concealed the men's movements, their shadows flickering ominously in the fading light. Emily's mind flitted back to Marcus Kane, the lone figure she had glimpsed earlier, the stranger who had appeared just in time. Unknown to her, Marcus had sensed the shift in the forest's energy hours before. His instincts, sharpened by years of service in hostile environments, had picked up on the abandoned trail and broken branches, signs that someone had passed through recently, and not by choice. He had been tracking these suspicious movements quietly, piecing together a picture of growing criminal activity in the area. When the frantic barking of Max reached his ears, accompanied by the hurried footsteps of someone fleeing, Marcus knew time was running out. Every second counted. Emily struggled against the ropes, her fingers numb but determined. She felt Max's body tense beside her, his eyes scanning the shadows, searching for any sign of rescue. The thugs were methodical, their voices low and menacing as they discussed plans to eliminate any witnesses. "We can't leave her alive," one muttered, his gaze flickering to the distant tree line where Marcus had disappeared moments before. Emily's heart pounded louder, but she forced herself to remain still, to not give them any reason to act hastily. She glanced down at Max, whose ears flicked toward the forest edge, alert to the slightest sound. Marcus moved with purpose now, weaving through the dense forest floor with the quiet precision of a predator. His eyes scanned every shadow, searching for the source of the distress signals he had picked up. The broken branches and disturbed underbrush were clear indicators. Someone had been here recently, and not by choice. As he neared the location, Marcus could hear the muffled sounds of struggle. Max's barking, Emily's whispered reassurances, and the low voices of the men. His grip tightened on the tactical knife at his side, readying himself for the confrontation ahead. The men were closing in on Emily and Max, their footsteps crunching softly on the leaf litter. They moved with a chilling certainty, intent on ensuring that no witnesses survived to tell the tale of their crimes. Their earlier confidence was now edged with impatience and aggression. Emily's mind raced through every possible escape route, every trick she had learned during her years in the wilderness. But the ropes were too tight and the men too close. She whispered to Max, urging him to hold on, to stay calm. From his concealed vantage point, Marcus calculated his approach. He couldn't afford to rush in blindly. The lives of Emily and Max depended on his ability to strike decisively and swiftly. Max's barking intensified, a desperate call for help that echoed through the trees. Emily's eyes locked onto Marcus's position, a silent plea mingling with a hope that salvation was at hand. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath as Marcus closed the distance. His military training kicked into overdrive, every step calculated, every movement precise. He was ready to face the men, to fight for the woman and dog who had become caught in a dangerous web. Emily's determination burned bright despite her restraints. She knew that survival was not just about strength, but also about faith in herself, in Max, and now in the stranger who was coming to their aid. The shadows deepened as the sun dipped below the horizon, and the forest became a stage for a confrontation that would test courage, loyalty, and the will to survive. Emily's wrists burned where the rough ropes bit into her skin, the coarse fibers digging deep as the thugs bound her tightly to the gnarled tree trunk. The bark pressed cold and unyielding against her back, a harsh reminder of her helplessness. Beside her, Max struggled fiercely, his powerful frame straining against the leash that tethered him to the same tree. His sharp barks pierced the thickening dusk, desperate and raw, but the bindings held firm. The dog's eyes, wide and alert, flicked between Emily and the encroaching figures, a silent vow of protection undiminished by their predicament. The forest around them grew quiet, the usual chorus of crickets and rustling leaves stilled by the sinister presence of the men who had left them there. Shadows lengthened as the sun dipped lower, the last light filtering through the dense canopy in mottled patches. Emily's breath was steady despite the cold sweat that slicked her forehead. She glanced at Max, whose ragged breathing mirrored her own rising panic. But beneath the fear, there was determination, a refusal to surrender to the darkness that closed in. The thugs had moved on, their footsteps fading into the distance, leaving Emily and Max alone in the growing gloom. Their departure was a chilling warning, a message etched in the silence. This was a place of danger, and witnesses were not welcome. Emily's fingers flexed against the ropes, testing their strength. But the bindings were expertly tied, tight, secure, unyielding. She cursed herself for underestimating the cold professionalism of these men. Max's whines turned to low growls as he strained harder, his teeth flashing briefly in the dim light. Emily reached out, pressing a calming hand against his thick muzzle. "It's okay, Max," she whispered, her voice trembling yet resolute. "We'll get out of this. We have to." The dog ceased his struggle for a moment, meeting her gaze with a flicker of hope. From the edge of the forest, hidden beneath the sheltering boughs, Marcus Kane watched intently. His piercing eyes missed nothing. The way the ropes cut into Emily's wrists, the dog's fierce but restrained struggle, the fading figures of the thugs disappearing into the shadows. Every detail was seared into his mind, fueling a surge of urgency. Time was against them. Marcus's tactical training kicked in as he scanned the area for signs of traps or additional guards. The forest floor was littered with broken twigs and disturbed leaves, subtle markers of the men's movements. He recognized the patterns, the placement of tripwires, the shallow pits partially concealed beneath brush. The criminals were thorough, determined to prevent any rescue attempts. He moved cautiously, every step deliberate and silent, weaving through the undergrowth with the ease of a predator stalking its prey. Marcus's breath was controlled, his senses heightened by years of experience in hostile environments. His gaze never wavered from Emily and Max, locked in their cruel captivity. The thugs' voices echoed faintly from deeper in the woods, their conversation muffled but laced with menace. Marcus caught fragments, plans to circle back, to ensure no loose ends remained. The realization hardened his resolve. He couldn't afford delay. He had to act now. Emily's mind reeled as she processed the gravity of their situation. The ropes were not merely restraints. They were a barrier between life and death. She scanned the tree, searching for anything sharp or loose that could aid in their escape. Her fingers scraped against the rough bark, seeking purchase. Max's growls rose again, his body tense as if sensing the approach of salvation. Emily's heart leapt, a spark of hope igniting as distant footsteps grew louder. She focused on the sounds, straining to identify friend from foe. Suddenly, a shadow detached itself from the trees. Marcus, moving swiftly and silently toward them. His presence was a beacon in the darkness, a promise of rescue. He knelt beside Emily, pulling a tactical knife from his belt with practiced ease. The blade gleamed faintly, a sliver of silver in the dim light. Marcus worked quickly, slicing through the ropes with surgical precision. Each cut was deliberate, his hands steady despite the pressure. Seconds felt like hours as he freed Emily's wrists, then moved to untie Max's leash. The dog's tail wagged tentatively, sensing the shift in their fortunes. Emily rubbed her raw wrists, tears of relief mingling with dirt and sweat. "Thank you," she whispered, voice hoarse but sincere. Max nuzzled her side, his eyes reflecting a fierce gratitude. But the danger was far from over. The thugs were not yet gone, and Marcus's gaze flicked toward the forest's edge, alert for any sign of their return. He helped Emily to her feet, their movements synchronized and purposeful. "Can you walk?" Marcus asked, voice low but firm. Emily nodded, steadying herself against the tree. Max remained close, his protective stance unwavering. The trio moved swiftly, threading their way through the shadowed forest, with Marcus leading the way. Behind them, the thugs' footsteps quickened, voices rising in anger and frustration. They had been caught off guard, but they were regrouping, intent on tracking down the escaped captives. Marcus glanced back, pulling his pistol from its holster. His movements were fluid, precise, a stark contrast to the chaotic threat behind them. He fired warning shots, echoing sharply through the trees, buying precious seconds. Emily and Max pressed on, the weight of exhaustion heavy but overshadowed by the will to survive. The forest seemed to close around them, every rustle and crack a potential threat. Marcus's experience guided their path to a hidden storm drain he knew from previous expeditions. A narrow tunnel that led beneath the forest floor, offering a covert escape route. He ushered Emily and Max toward the entrance, the faint sound of pursuit growing louder. With a final glance at the dark woods, Marcus plunged into the storm drain, pulling Emily and Max after him. The cold, damp tunnel was a stark contrast to the open forest, but it offered safety, at least for the moment. As they emerged on the other side, the distant wail of sirens signaled the arrival of backup. Relief washed over Emily in waves, mingling with the raw remnants of fear. Max barked softly, tail wagging with renewed vigor. Marcus's eyes remained vigilant, scanning the perimeter even as the chaos of rescue unfolded around them. The night was far from over, but for now, they had survived. Together. Marcus's boots pressed silently against the soft earth as he moved through the forest, eyes sharp and senses stretched taut. The fading light cast long shadows between the trees, but Marcus navigated the terrain with the surety of a man intimately familiar with every root and stone beneath his feet. His breath was steady, but inside, a storm of urgency churned. Emily and Max were out there, exhausted, frightened, and bound by ropes. The thugs would not wait long before returning, and Marcus knew time was running out. Ahead, a faint cry split the stillness, a desperate bark, raw and urgent. Max. The sound cut through the forest like a flare, guiding Marcus's steps. He quickened his pace, weaving carefully to avoid the crude traps he had spotted earlier. Thin tripwires strung between saplings, camouflaged pits concealed beneath leaf litter. Every step was calculated, every movement deliberate, as he closed in on the source. Suddenly, through a break in the trees, Marcus spotted them. Emily, her wrists tied tightly to a gnarled tree, eyes wide but unwavering. Max was beside her, his powerful frame coiled with tension, biting at the leash that held him captive. The men who had left them here had vanished for now, but their presence lingered like a dark stain on the forest floor. Marcus crouched low behind a fallen log, assessing the scene with a tactical mind. The ropes binding Emily were expertly knotted, and Max's leash was secured to the tree with a heavy chain. The thugs had been methodical, leaving no easy way out. But Marcus knew that with the right approach, he could free them before the criminals returned. The forest around him was eerily silent, save for Max's occasional growl and Emily's quiet breaths. Marcus's heart pounded, not with fear, but with determination. This was what he had trained for, what every drill and mission had prepared him to face. A rescue. He reached for his tactical knife, the blade a familiar weight in his hand. Moving swiftly but silently, he slipped through the underbrush, closing the distance without alerting the men who might still be lurking nearby. His mind raced through contingencies. What if the thugs circled back? What if more were waiting in the shadows? Emily's eyes flicked toward the approaching figure, a flicker of hope sparking in their depths. Max's growl softened as he recognized Marcus, his body relaxing just enough to allow the man to approach. Marcus knelt beside Emily, his voice low but reassuring. "I'm here to get you out," he whispered. "Stay calm." Carefully, Marcus began to cut through the ropes binding Emily's wrists. The coarse fibers resisted at first, but the sharp blade worked quickly. Seconds stretched as he worked, the forest holding its breath. Max shifted nervously, eyes darting toward the tree line, alert to any movement. Just as the last knot fell away, a rustle from the shadows jolted Marcus. He spun, knife raised, ready for confrontation. Emerging from behind a thick trunk came one of the thugs, eyes wild with rage, weapon drawn. Marcus reacted instantly, sidestepping and delivering a precise strike that disarmed the man and sent him sprawling. Emily let out a startled gasp but remained steady as Marcus secured her and Max. There was no time to pause. The rest of the gang would be close behind. "Run," Marcus urged, pulling Emily to her feet. Max bounded free, his tail wagging despite the ordeal. Together, they sprinted into the dense forest, Marcus leading the way with practiced ease. Behind them, angry shouts erupted as the thugs realized their prey was escaping. The sound of footsteps pounding on the forest floor grew louder, a relentless pursuit fueled by desperation and fury. Marcus glanced back, drawing his pistol and firing warning shots that echoed sharply through the trees. Each crack of the gunfire bought precious seconds, slowing the pursuers and forcing them to take cover. Marcus's training shone through. Every shot was calculated, aimed to intimidate rather than kill, to protect without escalating the violence unnecessarily. Emily stumbled but caught herself, the adrenaline pushing her forward despite the exhaustion threatening to claim her. Max stayed close, his presence a comforting anchor against the chaos. The forest seemed to close in around them, the path twisting and turning through thick underbrush and tangled roots. Marcus led them toward a hidden ranger station he knew well. A small outpost nestled in a clearing, equipped with communication tools and shelter. It was their best chance for safety and backup. As they neared the clearing, Marcus's sharp eyes spotted movement ahead, another group of thugs blocking their path. Without hesitation, he signaled Emily and Max to stay low and moved forward to engage. He fired a precise shot that shattered a nearby branch, distracting the men long enough for Emily and Max to slip past. The tension in the air was palpable. Every heartbeat a countdown to the inevitable clash. Marcus's mind raced, balancing the need for stealth with the urgency of escape. The thugs were ruthless, but he was relentless. Finally, they reached the ranger's station. Marcus slammed the door shut behind them, bolting it securely as he activated the radio. His voice was calm but urgent as he relayed their situation and requested immediate assistance. Emily sank onto a battered wooden bench, her chest heaving with exertion. Max lay at her feet, panting but alert, his eyes never leaving Marcus. The three of them shared a moment of quiet amidst the storm, bound by survival and an unspoken trust. Marcus examined Emily, noting the cuts and bruises she bore. "You're lucky," he said softly. "These guys don't mess around." Emily nodded, her gaze steady despite the ordeal. "I saw them," she said quietly. "They've been robbing places around here. I didn't know how big it was until today." Marcus listened intently, piecing together the fragments of her story. The thugs were part of a larger criminal ring, and Emily's accidental witness had put her squarely in their crosshairs. The radio crackled with the distant sound of sirens, signaling that help was on its way. But Marcus knew this was far from over. The criminals would regroup, and they would come back stronger. For now, though, the immediate threat was contained. Emily and Max were safe, for the moment, and Marcus was already planning the next move, ready to confront the shadows that lurked just beyond the forest's edge. Marcus knelt beside Emily, the sharp blade of his tactical knife glinting faintly as it caught the fading light filtering through the canopy. His fingers worked with practiced precision, slicing through the coarse ropes that bit into her wrists. Each cut was deliberate and controlled, a race against time as the distant sounds of the thugs' pursuit grew louder, their angry voices carried on the chill night air. Emily's breath hitched as the last knot gave way, the bindings loosening just enough for her to flex her numb fingers. Max, still tethered but restless, let out a low growl, sensing the shift in their fortunes. Marcus's eyes flicked up, catching the dog's tense posture, and he moved swiftly to cut through Max's leash, freeing the powerful German shepherd in a heartbeat. Seconds stretched like hours as Marcus assessed their surroundings, every nerve alert for the slightest movement. The forest seemed to hold its breath alongside them, shadows deepening as night settled in. The men who had captured Emily and Max were closing in, their footsteps crunching through the underbrush, weapons drawn and ready. Marcus's mind flashed through every possible scenario, calculating the risks and strategies with the calm efficiency that had sustained him through countless operations. There was no room for error. One wrong move, and the fragile advantage they'd gained could vanish in an instant. Emily's gaze remained steady, though the exhaustion etched into her features was undeniable. She trusted Marcus implicitly, her silent strength bolstered by the presence of the man who had appeared from the shadows to save her. Max stayed close, his body coiled like a spring, ready to defend at a moment's notice. Suddenly, the thugs burst through the trees, closing the distance with lethal intent. Marcus dropped into a defensive stance, the knife in his hand reflecting his readiness to engage. The first attacker lunged, blade flashing in the dim light, but Marcus was faster, sidestepping and delivering a precise strike that sent the man sprawling to the forest floor. More assailants followed, weapons raised, but Marcus moved with the fluidity and precision of a seasoned warrior. His knife found gaps in their defenses, disabling rather than killing, each blow calculated to incapacitate without unnecessary bloodshed. Emily and Max darted past the chaos, weaving through the trees as Marcus provided cover. The night air was thick with tension, punctuated by the clash of steel and the grunts of struggle. Marcus's focus was unwavering, his every action a testament to his training and resolve. He covered Emily's retreat, buying precious seconds as she and Max sprinted toward the relative safety of the forest's edge. Emily's lungs burned, but adrenaline propelled her forward. Max stayed close, his protective instincts guiding their path through the tangled undergrowth. Behind them, Marcus engaged the remaining attackers with relentless determination, his tactical skills turning the tide of the confrontation. As the last of the thugs fell back, retreating into the shadows, Marcus called out to Emily, "Run, get to the ranger station. I'll hold them off." Emily nodded, her heart pounding. She didn't hesitate. With Max at her side, she disappeared into the darkened woods, the promise of safety propelling her steps. Marcus's eyes scanned the trees, alert for any sign of reinforcements. His breath was steady despite the exertion, his mind already planning the next moves. The fight was far from over, but for now, they had gained the upper hand. The ranger's station loomed ahead, a small beacon in the wilderness. Emily pushed forward, her body aching but her spirit unbroken. Max barked softly, a reminder that they were not alone. Marcus followed soon after, his knife now sheathed as he prepared to regroup. The night's battle had tested their limits, but it had also forged a bond, a shared determination to survive and to bring justice to those who hunted them. As they reached the safety of the station, Marcus quickly secured the perimeter and began communicating with authorities. Emily tended to Max's minor injuries, her hands gentle despite the tremors of exhaustion. The distant wail of sirens signaled help was on the way, but Marcus remained vigilant. The criminals they faced were cunning and dangerous, and the shadows of the forest still held secrets. For now, though, they had escaped the immediate threat. And together, they would face whatever came next. Marcus's breath came steady and measured as he signaled to Emily and Max. The ropes that had bound them moments ago were now discarded on the forest floor, forgotten relics of a perilous captivity. The night air was thick with tension, as shadows from the towering pines stretched long and dark, cloaking the trio in a veil of urgency. Marcus's eyes flicked toward the distant sounds of pursuit. Angry shouts and the crunch of hurried footsteps growing ever closer. "Run!" Marcus commanded, his voice low but firm. "Head for the clearing near the ranger station. I'll hold them off." Emily didn't hesitate. Her legs moved on instinct, muscles burning with exertion, but propelled by the fierce will to survive. Max bounded beside her, powerful and agile, his ears pinned back and eyes scanning for threats. The forest, once a sanctuary, now felt alive with danger, every rustle a potential ambush. Behind them, Marcus shifted into action. Drawing his pistol with smooth efficiency, he took a position behind a large fallen log, the weapon steady in his hands. His training as a Navy SEAL came to the fore. He was a master of terrain, movement, and timing. Each shot he fired was precise, calculated to disrupt rather than kill, designed to buy time and space. The sharp cracks of gunfire echoed through the trees, sending birds flurrying into the night sky. The thugs, caught off guard by the sudden resistance, faltered momentarily. Their angry shouts turned to curses as they sought cover, reassessing their approach under Marcus's relentless fire. Emily and Max pressed on, hearts pounding, lungs burning. The path twisted through dense undergrowth, roots threatening to trip them with every step. But Marcus's shots kept the pursuers at bay, the sound a steady rhythm behind them. As they neared the clearing, the soft glow of the ranger's station came into view, a small beacon of hope amid the encroaching darkness. Marcus's eyes scanned ahead, noting the approach of another group of assailants attempting to flank him. He moved swiftly from cover to cover, their footsteps echoing loudly now as the distance closed. His pistol barked again, forcing the men to scatter and regroup. The forest seemed to pulse with the intensity of the chase, every second critical. Emily reached the ranger station, breath ragged but spirit unbroken. She pushed open the door, the familiar scent of pine cleaner and aged wood welcoming her. Inside, she found a radio and a small first aid kit. She knelt beside Max, checking his paws for injuries, her hands gentle despite the tremor of exhaustion. Outside, Marcus continued his defense, his every movement precise and deliberate. He knew the thugs would not give up easily. Their desperation made them dangerous. But he was determined to hold them off until help arrived. The sounds of sirens began to weave through the forest, distant but growing louder, a promise of reinforcements coming to their aid. Marcus allowed himself a brief glance toward the clearing, satisfied that Emily and Max were safe for the moment. He kept his focus sharp, eyes scanning for any sign of the enemies. Next move. The night was far from over, but the tide was turning. Marcus's gun barked once more, a final warning shot that scattered the remaining attackers into the shadows. Inside the ranger station, Emily's hands trembled as she patched a small scrape on Max's leg. The dog rested his head in her lap, eyes heavy but trusting. Emily looked up as Marcus finally entered, his face hardened but eyes softening at the sight of them both safe. "We're not out of danger yet," Marcus said quietly, "but we've bought ourselves some time." Emily nodded, drawing strength from his presence. Max's tail thumped softly against the floor, a steady beat of resilience amid the chaos. Together, they prepared to face whatever came next, united by survival and an unbreakable bond forged in the shadows of the forest. The hidden ranger station sat nestled among towering pines, a modest fortress of wood and stone that had weathered countless storms and seasons. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of pine resin and aged timber, a stark contrast to the damp, earthy odors of the forest outside. Marcus Kane's fingers moved quickly over the radio's controls, his voice calm but urgent as he relayed their situation to dispatch. Each word carried the weight of the danger they had narrowly escaped, and the threat that still lingered. Emily crouched beside Max, her hands gentle as she examined the dog's paw. The scrape was minor, a shallow abrasion from the frantic dash through underbrush, but her attention to detail spoke of her deep bond with the animal. Max's golden eyes met hers, full of trust and quiet strength. Despite the exhaustion etched into all their faces, the connection between them was unbroken. Marcus leaned against the rough-hewn wall, eyes scanning the forest beyond the small windows. His tactical mind was already shifting gears, piecing together the fragments of information Emily had shared earlier. The thugs they had confronted were not random criminals. They were part of a larger criminal ring, a network operating in the shadows of the region. Their recent robberies were just the surface of something far more insidious. "The men who captured you," Marcus began, voice low and steady. "They're linked to a bigger operation. Smuggling, thefts, things that have been flying under the radar because no one's been able to catch them in the act. You stepping into their path has put a spotlight on their activity. Emily nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. I didn't realize how serious it was until today. I thought it was just some local trouble. But those crates, the weapons, the way they moved, it was organized. Marcus's gaze hardened. That's why they tried to silence you. They can't afford witnesses. And now that they know you're alive, they'll come back. Outside, the distant wail of sirens grew louder, signaling the approach of law enforcement. Marcus's fingers tightened around the radio microphone. Backup is on the way, he confirmed. We need to secure this location and prepare for their arrival. Emily's eyes flicked to Max, whose ears twitched at the sounds beyond the walls. The dog's protective instincts were still on high alert, sensing the lingering danger despite the temporary safety. She reached out, stroking his head. We'll get through this, she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. Marcus moved to barricade the doors and windows with whatever materials were at hand. Wooden planks, heavy furniture, turning the small station into a makeshift stronghold. His military training guided every action, each movement efficient and purposeful. He checked his weapon, ensuring it was loaded and ready, then glanced at Emily. We won't let them take you again, he said firmly. Not while I'm here. The night outside deepened, shadows pooling around the station like a living thing. The forest seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. The quiet punctuated only by the distant sounds of sirens and the rustling of leaves. Marcus's mind raced, anticipating the criminals' next move. They were desperate, dangerous, and now aware that their operation was compromised. Emily's thoughts drifted to the life she had before, the peaceful hikes, the quiet mornings with Max, the simple joys of nature. That life felt distant now, overshadowed by the violence and fear that had invaded her sanctuary. Yet, in Marcus's steady presence and Max's unwavering loyalty, she found a flicker of hope. Outside, headlights pierced the darkness as police vehicles arrived, officers pouring out with weapons drawn, securing the perimeter. Marcus greeted them, briefing the team on the situation with concise clarity. The coordinated response was swift and methodical, a testament to the seriousness of the threat. As the officers moved into the forest, Marcus stayed close to Emily and Max, ready to protect them at a moment's notice. The tension was palpable, a silent acknowledgement that the confrontation was far from over. Inside the ranger's station, Emily's hands trembled slightly as she wrapped a bandage around Max's paw. The dog leaned into her touch, offering comfort and strength. Marcus watched them, a rare softness crossing his features. We're not just fighting for our lives tonight, he said quietly. We're fighting to bring down something much bigger. Emily met his gaze, determination igniting within her. Then, we fight together. The forest held its secrets tightly. But in this small station, amid the rising storm of law enforcement and impending danger, a fragile alliance was forged. Together, they prepared to face the darkness and the shadows lurking within. The forest was alive with the low murmur of voices and the steady crunch of boots on leaf-covered ground. Law enforcement officers, clad in tactical gear, moved methodically through the dense underbrush, their eyes sharp and weapons at the ready. At their helm was Marcus Kane, who led the team with a quiet authority born of years in the military and countless operations in hostile environments. His gaze was fixed ahead, alert to every sound, every movement that might betray the criminal's hideout. Emily walked close by, Max at her side, the loyal German shepherd's ears twitching to the subtle cues of the forest. though her body still bore the marks of the ordeal. The bruises on her wrists, the scrape on Max's paw, her spirit was unyielding. She had faced the darkness and survived, and now she was ready to reclaim the peace that had been stolen. As they approached a concealed clearing, Marcus signaled for the team to halt. The area was deceptively quiet, the dense trees and undergrowth masking the presence of the criminals' camp. The thugs had been meticulous in their efforts to hide their operation, but the officers' training and Marcus's experience gave them an edge. The team fanned out, moving silently to encircle the clearing. Marcus's eyes scanned for any sign of movement. Suddenly, a rustle near a stack of crates caught his attention. He raised his hand, signaling the team to prepare for engagement. Without hesitation, the officers breached the perimeter, weapons drawn and commands sharp. The criminals were caught off guard, their expressions flickering from surprise to anger as they scrambled to respond. Some reached for weapons, others attempted to flee, but the law enforcement presence was overwhelming. A tense standoff unfolded, punctuated by shouted orders and the clatter of crates being overturned. Marcus moved swiftly, his tactical training guiding his every step. He focused on securing the area and apprehending the key players in the operation. Emily watched from a safe distance, her heart pounding as the confrontation played out. Max stayed close, alert and ready to react if needed. The criminal's leader, a tall man with cold eyes and a scar running down his cheek, was quickly identified by Marcus. The man's expression hardened as he realized the operation was compromised. Marcus advanced, his voice calm but commanding. "It's over. Surrender now, and no one else needs to get hurt." The leader's defiance wavered as the reality of their situation sank in. One by one, the criminals laid down their weapons, hands raised in reluctant surrender. Officers moved in to cuff them, securing the scene with practiced efficiency. As the dust settled, Marcus approached Emily. "You did well," he said quietly, a rare note of admiration in his tone. "Your courage helped bring this down." Emily met his gaze, a mixture of relief and resolve shining through. "I just want this to end. For the animals, for the people in this community." Max barked softly, as if in agreement. Marcus smiled faintly. "We'll make sure it does." The operation marked a turning point, not just in the fight against the criminals, but in Emily's journey from victim to survivor. The bond forged between her, Max, and Marcus was unspoken but undeniable, a testament to the power of trust and determination. As the officers began to process the scene, Emily allowed herself a moment to breathe, to absorb the weight of what had transpired. The forest around them seemed to exhale, the tension easing as justice took root. Marcus remained vigilant, eyes scanning the horizon even as the immediate threat was neutralized. He knew this was just one battle in a larger war. But tonight, they had won. The moon rose high, casting silver light over the clearing, illuminating the path forward. A path marked by hope, resilience, and the unwavering spirit of those who refused to be broken. Weeks had passed since the storm of danger had swept through the forest, leaving behind a trail of shattered planes and captured criminals. Emily Carter walked along the familiar trail where she had once been bound and silenced. The morning sun casting warm light through the canopy, dappling the path in gold. Max trotted beside her, strong and healthy, his fur gleaming in the light. The scrape on his paw was long-healed, and his spirit seemed unbroken, if not bolstered by the ordeal. Emily's steps were lighter now, the weight of fear and uncertainty lifted by time and healing. The bond between her and Max had only deepened, forged in the crucible of survival and tempered by shared courage. With every breath of the forest air, she felt a renewed sense of strength and resilience. As she rounded a bend near the shoreline, Emily caught sight of a familiar figure jogging along the beach, a man whose presence had been both a mystery and a comfort in those darkest hours. Marcus Kane moved with the effortless grace of someone at home in the wild, his silhouette framed by the crashing waves and the rising sun. Their eyes met, and Marcus offered a nod that spoke volumes. Acknowledgement of battles fought, lives changed, and a quiet understanding that transcended words. Emily smiled, a mixture of gratitude and admiration shining through. They walked side by side for a while, the rhythm of their footsteps echoing the steady heartbeat of the ocean beside them. The scars of the past were still there, but now they were marks of survival, reminders of strength in the face of adversity. Emily glanced down at Max, who wagged his tail happily, sensing the peace settling over them all. "We made it," she said softly. Marcus nodded. "And we'll keep making it, together if you want." The promise hung between them like a lifeline, a new beginning born from the ashes of chaos. As the sun climbed higher, warming the sands beneath their feet, Emily felt a deep sense of faith and protection surrounding her, a reassurance that no matter the darkness, there were unseen forces guiding and guarding those who dared to stand strong. Their journey was far from over, but in this moment, they were no longer alone. The forest, the ocean, and the bonds they had forged whispered of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of companionship. Emily turned toward Marcus, her voice steady and filled with quiet determination. "Let's keep walking forward." And so they did, stepping into the light of a new day, ready to face whatever lay ahead, united, unbroken, and forever changed.